Hello, everybody. Welcome back again. This isn't the Top Lobster Show. This is something a little bit different. I'm here with my boy Raven, David Corbo. You can find him on Twitter. We were talking, and we decided that both of our podcasts are okay, but if we do one together, it might just be like mediocre. So we're gonna try to do this like Swapcast thing, and we're gonna see where it goes. Our first guest that we're bringing in. To my right, obviously, you're going to see Micah Dank, but we'll save his introduction for after. David, tell us who you are. Introduce yourself, man.
What's going on, Top? My name is David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. I am the host of The Ravens Watch. It is a paranormal conspiracy theory / occultist podcast. So it's my way of exploring all these topics and bringing the audience along with me for the ride. So we cover everything from aliens and Bigfoot to, the numerology and the hermetic orders and things of that nature and everything in between, and a lot of conspiracy theory stuff. And so it's kind of a widespread, but it's everything that I'm interested in. And so, yeah, it's a new show, like I said, called The Ravens Watch. You can find me on YouTube and you can find me on Twitter at David_Lee_Corbo. That's where I do most of my interactions.
Yeah, not totally intuitive at for Twitter, so go follow him there. And listen, man, Mr. Micah, it's been like how many? Maybe 2 months. I've been trying to schedule you, and things fall through. At some point, I was like, he probably thinks that I don't want to talk to him, and he's right.
I knew that. Like, I knew that you were burning crosses. You had shit to do. Don't worry. Everything was. I know how this works. I've done the dance a couple times. I knew we were gonna get together eventually.
Hell yeah, I'm glad we're talking now. Tell us about yourself, and let's jump right into it.
So my name is Micah. I've been studying the Bible for about 30 years. I've been studying the occult and the esoteric for about 20. About 2012, so 11 years ago, maybe 11 and a half years ago, I stumbled on something called astrotheology. And for those of you who are mildly familiar with it, what the media did was when the Zeitgeist movie came out, when Peter Joseph put it out, and they had that whole Jesus is the Son thing and all that kind of stuff, right? And then people dismissed it. They had debunking videos and all that stuff. And then it kind of went away. When Peter Joseph first put the video out, he was not on camera. There was no picture of him on the internet. And it was an incredibly touchy subject to throw out there in the way that he did it. But he basically hid himself anonymously until a few years later when he was able to do this. If I were to do this podcast with you even 20 years ago, they'd be knocking down my door right now. What I have found through my research is I have found a 17, or at least I can say that it's 17,000 at least year-old astrological code that when you apply the cipher that I figured out to any ancient historical text, holy text, I should say, everything from the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Sumerian works, to the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Jews, the Christians, the Muslims, the Book of Mormon, everything from the Sumerians to the Book of Mormon, including all the Gnostic texts, including all the texts that were removed from the Bible, every single one, you can apply this cipher to it. And what it does is it takes certain keywords and it'll link them to certain zodiac signs. And what you'll find is it's an encoded way of basically mapping out the heavens. And that's what I found. And I know it sounds absolutely crazy, but I've done this presentation about 700 times. I'm probably going to Acapulco to do this at some point next year. And it's like when I see a lot of stuff that people put on the internet when they're or on Twitter or whatever, I follow a lot of Christians too, where they're just arguing the wrong points. What they're arguing is they're trying to use logic and faith against each other. And what you have to understand is that the books that were written were encoded deeply. There's actually a quote that I'm going to show you in the presentation from a guy named John Dominic Crossan. And what John Dominic Crossan said is, it's not that the ancients told literal stories and we are now smart enough to take them symbolically. It's that they told them symbolically and we are now dumb enough to take them literally. And that's basically what has happened. My website is called debunkmywork.com. I've been sharing this for 3.5 years now. Not one single person, Christian or atheist, has come on my channel to debunk me. Not one single video, and I've checked on YouTube or anything, Rumble, Rockfin, all that stuff. Not one single video. Oh, wait till you find this out in Vision. Not one single video has been made to basically debunk me. And that's why I named my website Debunk My Work. Like, you'd think it's tongue in cheek. It's not. Like, I got into this to literally be debunked. And to me and to a lot of people, because I've got a pretty decent following, it's with this work, it's flawless. You can't argue it. What it is the problem with Zeitgeist didn't go nearly far enough with the research. They kept it surface level and they were able to just dismiss it. It was a good introduction for people.
So Micah, one question. You don't believe literally like anything in the Bible? You don't think that actually happened? You think it's all symbology?
It's okay. So what you're going to find is the Bible is made up of 10 holy sciences. The Bible is made up of numerology, etymology, astrology, astrotheology. It's made up of alchemy. It's a metaphysics book. It's a psychic book. There's all these different layers to it. I just teach one layer. My point is simply this, is that you can believe in God, which I explain too in my videos, what God is. You can believe in God and believe the Bible is the most incredible book ever written, but it was never meant to be taken literally. Before Constantine united everybody under literal Christianity in 325 AD. Some people will actually argue that it was on his deathbed that he got baptized. Some people will say it was in his life. It's kind of up in the air, and it's irrelevant. Because prior to Constantine bringing everyone under Christianity, Christians were called Helionostics. And Helios in Greek is the sun, and Gnosis means knowers. They were sun worshippers. They knew this. In the Bible, when they talk to you about Abraham discovering monotheism, that's not true at all. The Jews stole that idea from the Egyptians. The pharaoh Akhenaten in the year 1367 BC created a unified religion where they worshiped the sun as God. And then that's what Christianity basically became. It's the same thing. And a lot of people will say son of God, son of God. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant because all the evidence lines up to that. So when you ask me if I believe anything in the Bible happened, it's kind of like, so Top, I've got an 8-book series out right now called Into the Rabbit Hole, where I basically explain all of this. And I also explain how we've been lied to in society, how we've been lied to, what we've been lied to in society. And I kind of teach it like my book series is a mix between 1984 meets like Da Vinci Code, because you have to write truth in fiction. That's how you get away with a lot. That's how everybody knows this. Jules Verne knew this. Aldous Huxley knew this. Philip K. Dick knew this. George Orwell knew this. You write truth in fiction. It casts a wider net. So that's what I did. And my book series has real places in it. I didn't make up a fantasy land. This isn't Lord of the Rings. This isn't Game of Thrones. These are real places. So when the Bible talks about real places existing, that doesn't prove that what happened actually happened. All it does is it proves that it's drawing from what's reality on Earth, real places, real locations. There are some things that can be taken truthfully in the Bible.
I got a question.
Yeah.
It's something that always runs through my mind. Israel in the Bible, is it geographically the same Israel that we know right now?
Well, the land was Palestine. Israel itself, you think it's a holy word. It's actually not. What Israel is the Jews took that from Egypt. It's a combination of 3 gods. It's Isis, Ra, and El. Israel. In
He's
fact,
gotta steal everything, huh?
Yeah. In fact, there's a town in Israel called Megiddo. It's the root of the word Armageddon, and it's where the rapture is supposed to start taking place. What happened is there was a church in Megiddo, And what basically happened is some dude was like walking through it and he like slipped and put his foot through the ground. And when he did and they pulled back and looked under what they found in that hole, they found a completely buried church. And I could probably pick up the picture, but I could probably show you the picture. But basically, when they excavated this church, it was from the 200s. It's the oldest church in Israel. And right in the middle of the floor in this church in Megiddo is the two fish Pisces, because Jesus is a solar deity of the age of Pisces, whereas the Jews worship the ram. This is why they blow the ram's horn during the holidays. It's because they're the people of Aries. It was the age before. Whereas the Egyptians, who was the age of Taurus, who was before that. That's why you see all the hieroglyphs with the bulls, with the sun between its horns. It's telling you. In the Bible, Moses goes up to Mount Sinai, right? Now, remember how I told you it's an etymology book. Sinai is not the name. Sinai is a combination of two Sumerian words. Sin, which means moon god, and Ai, which means mountain. It was the mountain of the moon god. Why? Because they're in the desert. They see this mountain, right, which was a volcano. The moon came up behind it. So they thought that's where the moon came from. So they called it Mount Sinai. Sinai. That's where it came from. He goes up top to get the commandments, and they hear a lot of rumbling. They hear a lot of noises. So everyone down there is like, God's talking to him. God's talking to him. It's a volcano. This is why when he comes down and he sees everybody, his face is bright red, because it was heated up from the volcano. The word in Hebrew for thunder translates to voices. So that's where that came from. He comes down and he sees them worshiping a golden calf. What's more likely? Taking this story literally, that the Jews who were run out of Egypt, even though there's absolutely no proof that that happened, the Egyptians kept extraordinarily meticulous records, even the shit that that embarrassed them. They kept records of everything. There's zero mention of Exodus happening. In fact, that's what Anwar Sadat told Menachem Begin during the peace accords in 1977, and he got laughed at. He comes down and he sees them worshiping a golden calf. So supposedly the story goes like this. The Jews were run out of Egypt so fast that they couldn't even let the bread rise. They couldn't even let the bread rise, which is why there's matzah to this day, which is unleavened bread. That's all it is. It's just bread without yeast. So they packed up everything that they could carry, ran to the desert. But you're telling me that the people that were there had enough gold, pulled it all together when Moses was up top. Moses, by the way, who is again ripped from the Egyptians, comes from the word Tuthmosis, who was an Egyptian relic. And he's basically...
What was that word again?
Huh?
What was that word again?
He was basically a relic. That's just like
Tuthmosis.
Everybody's heard of Tuthmosis. That's where he gets the name Moses from. And he's based off Akhenaten. So he comes down, and either these Jews, while he was up there doing all this, built this giant calf out of, they were so broke, they had nothing, but they had all this gold, right? And they built this enormous statue. Or it's a metaphor. Because the Jews were worshiping the golden calf. Well, the sun is the gold, and the calf is the bull, Taurus. They were worshiping the age of Taurus. Whereas the Jews are the people of Aries, the ram. That's why they blow the ram's horn. Which goes down even further, because the Christians, when the Jews wrote the New Testament, because the Jews did write the New Testament in Greek, wasn't in English, wasn't in Hebrew, wasn't in Sumerian. When the Jews wrote the New Testament, Jesus is the age of Pisces. That's why he feeds the masses with two fish. Pisces is the two fish. It's all tied in there. It's the basis of everything. It's the oldest and the most prevalent science through the Bible. The Bible is never meant to be taken literally.
So, Micah, this body of information is absolutely massive. I have heard your appearances on other podcasts. I have watched some of the videos that you sent me. And one of the things that really struck me is I was almost overwhelmed with the body of information. Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought up Zeitgeist so early on already, because a lot of the thoughts that were evoked from what I was watching for you brought up memories of Zeitgeist. I was a big fan of the film. I watched it several times. I even, when I first started dating my wife, tried to get her to watch it. She thought that I was retarded. But it's a very interesting topic to me. And what I'd like to know is, how does this get started for you? How do you start to scratch at this and become interested in this topic? And
great question.
I mean, because look at where you are now. You've got literally a presentation that is incredibly thorough.
It's got an
And so
8-book
I'd be
series.
interested in knowing the origins of that.
So about 11 years ago, I have two mentors. One of them died. His name was Jordan Maxwell. And another one, his name is Santos Bonocci, who I teach for now. Let me just be honest with you guys. I know that you may have religious people that watch you or not. But when I first discovered this, look, this is the funny part, Top, is I grew up in a conservative Jewish household. And you're fucking hysterical. I grew up in a conservative Jewish household, and I never took to it. Religion, I was never scared of it. I was never into it. None of that. I can remember being 9 years old in temple with my parents on the holidays and just like sneaking out and going to play with my friends because I thought everybody's just sitting there praying and it was dumb. So I wasn't even religious. And when I discovered the stuff that I talk about right now, I ended up in a hospital for 3 weeks because I lost my mind. And I wasn't even religious. I can't imagine what it's like for people when they discover they've been lied to. But what I started telling people is, listen, you know that we're lied to about everything. The media, you know, we're lied to about the government. You know, we're lied to about the wars. We're lied to about all this stuff. Why do you think religion is any different? So I started watching this guy Santos's video, and I realized this is the key. This is what I have to do. And then when I really got familiar with the 12 zodiac signs, I started playing with words. Like, for example, which I'll go into, Taurus is the bull, right? And the reason it's the bull is because in the ancient times, it's as above, so below, which is occult, which means the word occult means hidden. That's all it means in Latin. Occult is not scary. They're trying to divert you from it because that's the basis of these books.
It's like the original conspiracy theory, huh?
This is the oldest one. And it's not even just the Bible that I do, Top. I have a video. In 3.5 hours, I could destroy any ancient holy text. This is the cipher that I showed, that I came up with, that I put through, shows distinct patterns in the sky. What I'm trying to tell people is the Bible, from an astrotheological point of view, is Jesus is an anthropomorphic, allegorical version of the sun going through Joseph Campbell's hero's journey through the 12 zodiac signs. In fact, every ancient text is that, and it'll show that. And I've gone through, on my website, I have not 10, not 20, not 30.
Hold on, Micah, I'm excited. You keep on cock teasing us. Start us at the first zodiac sign. How does this happen? Walk us through this, because all right. I feel like we're just rimming around the edge. Let us know, man. I'm ready.
Oh yeah, we're rimming. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna pull up the presentation. Okay.
All right. He's gonna pull this up, guys. It's interesting. Listen, no matter how you feel about like Micah was just saying, no matter how you feel about this, either way, this is information and it's well studied. So pay attention. Take from it what you will. And I know I've taken a lot away in some of the prior things that I've heard you do. But go ahead, man.
Top, would it surprise you, and Raven, would it surprise you to tell you that to this day, not only has nobody debunked me, but I have never in any social media, email, or anything received a death threat. Ever. That should say something.
I see you're doing it wrong. You're
not being offensive enough.
Yeah, I receive death threats every day, man. Come on, step your game up.
I got to. Okay. So let's start with this. Employ your time with him. You guys can see this, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Employ your time with other men's by yourself with other men's writings, so that you shall come easily by what others have labored hard for. That's Socrates. Between astrotheology, the occult, esotericism, and the Bible, I've studied this combined for about 60 years. I've put everything that I've learned into 3.5 hours. Now, this is not 3.5 hours. This is 146 slides. I don't know how long you guys have, but I could do the whole thing. What I start with is showing this, the Holy Bible. The scriptures are metaphysical, astrological. That's what I teach, the astrological part. Anatomical, alchemical, spiritual, esoteric, and mythology. Now, I can give you an example of each of these as we go along, which I will. It's also an etymology, numerology, and a gematria book. There's 10 holy sciences in the Bible. Each of these sciences are as deep as what I'm about to show you for one of them. Now, the Bible is not literal, it's not historical, it's not reality, and it's not original. We'll get into all that. So this is the zodiac. And this is how you should look at a zodiac when you actually look at the zodiac. Cancer is at the top, whereas Capricorn's at the bottom. This is what the zodiac looks like. Now, I told you that it's a 17,000-year-old cipher. It goes back to something called the Lascaux Caves. which are about 17,000 to 40,000 years ago. Now, here's an article saying the Lascaux cave paintings are 17,000 years. On the right, you see an article saying world's oldest cave paintings show humans understood complex astronomy 40,000 years ago. And it makes sense because they would just look up. They had no light pollution. They had no industry. They would just look up and they would see everything. And then what they basically did is they saw shit moving around and doing things, and they ascribed childlike stories to it. So this is what they saw in the Lascaux caves. A bunch of teenagers went there, and it's the same thing that the way, if you believe the story, how they found the Dead Sea Scrolls with that goat herder's son that went into the cave and found them. It was the same shit. A bunch of teenagers went into the caves, went to the back of the Lascaux caves, and they saw this. Now on the top you see the bull, and on the right you see the many faces of the lion, and on the bottom you see the horse. And the horse is Sagittarius. It's just missing the guy with the bow and the arrow. The bull is Taurus. The lion is Leo. What they did was they called people because they were like, hey, we found this. And then eventually they brought in some scientists. And they carbon dated this. Now the Christians are going to come out and tell me that carbon dating is inaccurate. And then I'm going to say, you're right, it is. However, you're half right. Because carbon dating, carbon-14 dating, is accurate up to 50,000 years. But when you start to get into the millions, it's a joke. It doesn't work like that. However, there's other kinds of uranium dating, there's other types of carbon dating, there's other datings out there. But at the time that they found this, they carbon dated and it came out to 17,000 years. What they next did was they figured out the three signs, right? So what they did was they brought in an astrologer with a computer, because we have the technology to do what I'm about to tell you. What they did was they rewound the sky back 17,000 years to see what the sky looked like. They printed it out, and when they put it up against the cave, all the constellations lined up in the right place. So this is the very beginning that I've been able to trace that astrology has been known and prevalent. And there's a reason, and I will explain this to you guys, why the Christians and the Jews and the Muslims forbid astrology. Now, there are questions in the Bible. How Jesus was able to heal the blind, how he walked on water, how he turned water into wine, why he had 12 disciples, why he was betrayed with a kiss by Judas, why he was dead for 3 days, why is his birthday on December 25th. All of this can be explained with astrology, and we will. Now in Genesis 1:14, it says, let lights appear in the sky to separate the day from the night. Let them be signs to mark the seasons, days, and the years. And that's what it is. From an astrological interpretation of the Bible is nothing but a farmer's almanac. And we'll get into that too. Now, each zodiac sign... Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do want to ask you briefly, is the reason that you focus on the astrological aspect of the Bible, having already said that there's so many different layers, right? Alchemical, numerology, all these different things. Is that because you think that the astrological aspect is the most viable or the largest body of work? What made you grab onto that?
It's the first one I discovered. It just spoke to me the most. It's the oldest. It's the most prevalent. And then when I applied my cipher, I realized that every single ancient society's holy books, every single one, can be broken down the same way that I'm going to break this down for you guys. So it's just It's just the most prevalent. That's why.
And would you say that it is because I'm also peripherally aware of numerology? I've had my astrological mapping done, and I was very impressed by what this person was able to tell me about myself. But I've also had my numbers, numerology done as well, and that was also pretty spot on. Would you say that it's superior to numerology in that regard?
No, it's just a different layer.
Okay.
What I do is introduce people to thinking that the Bible is more than it is, because reading it as a literal story on the surface level, you're going to have issues. You're going to have to fight it with apologetics. You're going to have to sit there and argue with atheists. Atheists, for the most part, I'm completely convinced that atheism is not a intelligent argument that people come to. What it is it's a reaction to literal religion. And I understand that. I get the optics in that. But they're missing a whole point. So, you guys want me to just continue?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
All right. So I start with Aquarius. This is the first sign I start with. Now, the year technically begins in Aries. But I start in Aquarius because that's kind of the beginning of our year. Now, what you'll see here is the man with the water pitcher pouring it out. Okay? That's the story of Zeus and the young boy. This is a Greek story. The story of Zeus and the young boy, I'll just tell it real quick. Zeus saw, and it was very specific too, a blonde 14-year-old boy on Earth that he wanted in heaven because he thought he was beautiful. The boy's father wouldn't give him. Zeus bargains with the boy's father, gives him a whole bunch of stuff, land, money, animals, things of that nature, things that were important back then, takes the boy to heaven. The boy's allowed to go. Every day the boy is feeding the angels, I mean not the angels, the gods, something called ambrosia, which was the drink of the gods, out of this water pitcher. He's doing it every day. And one day he gets fed up with doing it, goes to the side of heaven, and pours it out just like in this picture. And what happens is that floods the earth. That's where the Greeks get their flood story from. Now, Zeus, who's usually a very sexually deviant, angry god, in a moment of self-reflection, realizes that he brought this young boy up without any friends or anything, and instead of punishing him for what he had done, he immortalizes him as the constellation Aquarius. So this is the constellation Aquarius. So there's keywords. Son of man and man, because this is the sign of the man, whereas Virgo is the sign of the woman. Baptism, because this is how you baptize someone. Water pitcher, because this is a water pitcher. Fountain, for example, because the Greek fountains were made like this. And then because there's water in the picture, stream, river, pond, lake, ocean, sea, for that example. Now, Aquarius in astrology is an air sign. It's not a water sign. The water sign is Pisces, the mutable water sign, which is the sign of the two fish in the water. So all the water examples still apply here because there's water here. So there's water here. There's water here. Which one they're talking about when they reference certain water things depends on the patterns that it will make in the heavens. This will all make sense to your listeners, I can promise you. So Aries is actually the beginning of the year. And the reason is because in Aries, you have March 21st, which is the spring equinox. It's a 12-hour day and a 12-hour night. It's also the Passover. There's 3 different types of Passovers. The first, the oldest, and what the other 2 are based on is the sun on March 21st, literally passing over the equator and starts to make its way back up to the summer solstice, where things will get warm, where things will grow, where things are better. Now, in Christianity, the passing over is changed, and it becomes the resurrection of God's Son. It comes back to life. It's the same thing. And then you have the Jewish Passover. The Jewish Passover is when the angel of death passes over all the houses, and anyone that doesn't have the lamb's blood, well, what is a lamb? That's a baby ram. So anyone that doesn't identify themselves with the age that they're in, with the blood of that animal, the baby lamb, on their doorpost, their firstborn sons get killed. So the key words here are ram, shepherd, ram's horn, and lamb. Taurus is the bull. Remember I was telling you guys as above, so below? When you look in the sky and you see Taurus, that's when you know you see the bull in the sky, you put the plow on the bull. Now, we've got John Deere shit to do that now. But back in the day, they didn't. They used the bull. That's how they plowed, so that you can plant the seeds so you can harvest in Virgo and Libra. So when you're talking about bull, ox, calf, or cow, and again, a cow is the female bull. This will make sense when I break down Matthew. Now, Gemini is the twins. It's the story of Castor and Pollux Troy, whose sister was Helen of Troy. It's the story of Achilles. So whenever you're talking about twins or brothers, you're talking about Gemini. Now, Cancer is the crab, and the crab moves like this. It goes sideways. So the sun does the same thing too. So if this pouch, right, is the sun, starting on December 25th, the sun rises a degree. Then on December 26th, it's going to rise an additional degree. 27th, an additional. Every day, an additional degree. What that means is the sun is going higher during the day. The days get longer. The nights get shorter. It gets warmer. When it hits June 21st, that's the summer solstice. That's its absolute height. The sun is at its absolute height. What it does on June 22nd is it's not going to drop a degree or raise another degree because it's at its height. What it does is it walks sideways. It stays at that same height for 3 days. Then on June 25th, it drops a degree. June 26th, it drops a degree. Now, in contrast to that, what that means is now the nights are getting longer, the days are getting shorter. It's going to get cold again. The crab in the ancient Egyptian time was known as the scarab. Incidentally, it walks sideways twice, June 21st to June 24th, and then drops a degree. But then it does the same thing in December, which I'll show you. Then Leo is the king. He's the lion. He's the king of the jungle, the king of the savannah, whatever you want to call it. The ruling planet of Leo is actually the sun. So whenever you're talking about lion, lioness, or cub, you're talking about Leo. Now, Virgo is the woman holding the wheat stalk. It's the virgin. So remember before when we said that you plant in Taurus? Well, the reason Virgo is a sign of a woman holding a wheat stalk is because during Virgo, that's when the virgins would go out, cultivate the wheat, and make bread for the year. So whenever you see virgin, wheat, grain, seed, barley, or corn, these are all things that have to do with harvest. That's Virgo. Now, Libra is the justice. It's the scales, it's the balance, it's the just one. The reason it's the justice is because it judges God's sun as it passes over the fall equinox and begins its descent into winter, into cold, into death. And I made a post on Facebook today saying Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, is September 15th, right? That's in Virgo. And the reason the Jewish New Year is in Virgo is, again, this was ripped from the Egyptians. Remember how I told you that the ancient Jews started the year in Aries because that was the spring. That was when things cleared up. That was when things started to get warm again. However, the Egyptians started the year in Virgo, the wheat harvest, which is why the sun would come to an end in Leo, and then a brand new born sun comes through a virgin in Virgo. This is where it goes back to. So the Jews always celebrate the new year around the fall equinox. However, the new year is in Virgo. But 8 days after the Jewish New Year, which conspiracy hats time, is September 23rd. So you got a lot of things going on, people talking about that specific day. Why? That's the first day of Libra. What happens 8 days after the Jewish New Year? You have a day called Yom Kippur. It's when the Jews go to temple, they fast all day, they don't drink all day, and they pray to God to keep them in the book of life for another year. Well, what is Yom Kippur? It's the day of judgment. Well, of course, the day of judgment starts in Libra, the scales, the judge. So the key words would be law, judge, justice, the just one, as Jesus is called, divorce, marriage, court. These are all lawly things. Now, Libra is also when you pull your wine. That's when you crush the grapes. Anybody that's ever been to a vineyard, right? Anybody that's ever been to a vineyard, if you go in the spring when all the bachelorettes go, it's stupid because all the freaking, it's bare. But if you go during Libra, you can literally walk up and down. Everything is lush. You can pick the grapes and eat them. That's when you go. So Libra is all law-related things. Libra is also all wine-related things. And the last thing that Libra is it's also olive oil season. That's when you harvest the olives to make the oil. Incidentally, frankincense and myrrh are both olive plants, which goes into a breakdown when the three wise men who represent Orion's belt go to bring frankincense and myrrh that represents olive plants. Or that represents olives, that represents Libra. And this will make a lot more sense. I'm just trying to get through the 12 signs. Now, Scorpio is the scorpion, and he is the betrayer. Because when a scorpion bites you or stings you, it's going to leave an imprint in your skin that looks like a pair of lips. So it's going to look like it kissed you, but there's poison in it. So it's just a deep metaphorical sign of the betrayal. And it's why the mafia have the kiss of death. That's where they get that from. And it's why Jesus was betrayed by Judas with a kiss. Because Judas could have pointed him out. He could have thrown a rock at him. He could have hugged him. He betrayed him with a kiss because Judas represents Scorpio. Because each one of the 12 zodiac signs represented by one of the 12 disciples. And I'll get into that too. So where are we with this story? The sun is judged in Libra with the scales. And it's betrayed in Scorpio. And then finally here in Sagittarius, this is where the bow and the arrow shoot the sun and inflict further punishment on the sun. On December 21st, that's the winter solstice. The sun is at its lowest. It's not going to go any lower. The ancients would go out on December 21st, right? And they would look in the sky. The sun wouldn't even crack the horizon. So the ancients used to say the sun was dead. And then it's going to walk sideways like the crab did in June for 3 days. So now God's sun is dead for 3 days. When on December 25th, or the birth of God's son, it comes back to life. It is born again. So whenever you're talking about horse, bow and arrow, spear or horseman, and I explain spear later, you're talking about Sagittarius. And then finally you have Capricorn, who's the goat. This one's actually quite simple because if you look at the zodiac wheel on the right, Capricorn's at the bottom. Now, imagine I just put a little magnet at the very bottom of that wheel, and I start moving it to the left 1 degree a day, mimicking the sun rising an additional degree a day on its way to its height in the middle of Cancer, or at the beginning of Cancer. The sun starts the great climb up the mountain, metaphorically, in Capricorn, just like the goats do. It's as above, so below. Just like, have you ever seen a mountain goat climb the side of a ledge before? They're insane. But those are the 12 signs. Those are the key words. You guys have any questions before I start really diving into stuff?
Top, you got anything?
No. I'm trying to digest.
I know it's a lot.
I want to ask you.
Yeah.
You mentioned the 23rd, and I don't really know too much about it. You briefly went over that, but as you did mention, it's kind of going around right now, right? Where people think that something is, and it came up in a prior show that I did yesterday, I believe, and I didn't really have any answers for it. I know that people are anticipating something happening. I know that some of that is due.
It's the first day of Libra. It's the first day of Libra for starters. I go into this later in this presentation. I actually talk about it, but I show you how. You know how JP Morgan said millionaires don't need astrology, but billionaires do?
Yeah.
Right? There's a reason for that. For example, they always crash the stock markets in Libra, the judgment, because we're being judged. So it could be a stock market crash. I thought it was last year, but then I traced it even further because they don't usually crash it when a Democrat's in office. But they might this year. But that's it. September 23rd is Yom Kippur. It's the day of judgment. So it's as above, so below. What I'm teaching you guys, the reason I teach this stuff is because I'm showing you how the elites know this and use it against you. Like it's not even a discussion with whether or not this is true, because this is. I'm just going to show you how deep it goes. That's the thing. So there are names for Jesus, right? You guys have names for Jesus in church. But remember the signs of the zodiac and the key words. So when the sun, Jesus, is in Capricorn, the goat, he's called the scapegoat of Israel. When the sun is in Aquarius, the sign of the man, he is the son of man. When the sun, or Jesus, is in Pisces, the two fish, he's the fisherman of men. And it's why he feeds the masses with two fish. When the sun is in Aries, the ram, he is known as the Lamb of God, or the Good Shepherd. Cancer, right, is the crab, but in the Egyptians' times, it was called the scarab. So Christians who quote St. Augustine at me don't realize that he called Jesus the good beetle because he even knew this. When Jesus was in Leo, the lion, he's the Lion of Judah. The lady holding the stalk of wheat, Virgo, he is born of a virgin, and he is called the bread of life. Libra, the scales of justice, he is known as the just one. Then he's betrayed in Scorpio. He dies in Sagittarius, which is December 21st. It's the last day of Sagittarius. And on top of which, what does it say at the bottom? Oh, it's also why he's worshipped on the sun day. Whereas the Jews worship on the Saturday or the Saturn day, because the Jews, so it goes like this. The Egyptians worshiped the sun as God. The Jews worshipped the moon and Saturn because they were Saturnalia worshippers. The black cube, this is why the Jews wear a black cube on their head, because that's Saturn. And then the Christians worship the sun again. Now, look at this picture on the left of Jesus. This is a stereotypical one that I just ripped off the internet. You guys at home can do the same thing too. The sun is always behind Jesus because he represents the sun. They tell you in every single picture, find a picture where the sun's not there. Find a baby picture of Jesus in the manger where the sun's not behind his head. Now, the two fingers up like this is an ancient Egyptian Kemetic peace sign. Okay, so I do a thing of Illuminati hand symbols, but basically this that we've come to accept as a peace sign, the John Lennon peace sign, this is actually Churchill's V for Victory British war sign that he used to give. The fingers are separate. This is bringing it together. This is the ancient peace sign. When you see Jesus doing this, or you see Buddha doing this, or you see Vishnu or Baphomet even doing this, they're telling you they're coming peacefully. You don't know what you're looking at. You have to understand this stuff.
Hey, Micah, what does like the OK sign mean? Or it's like a...
Oh, I go into that. You talking about this one?
No, yeah. In the Greek Orthodox Church, there was a lot of like symbology with the two fingers, and I think it was pointer finger or middle finger touching, or maybe
like
I don't know. There was something going on. I'll look
So
it up. I'm
this
sorry.
is actually really simple. This, okay. Well, what they'll do is they'll tell you that this is white power, right? Remember that bullshit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, it's
They'll
not?
also tell you that this is
Fuck.
666, right? Represents the devil. It doesn't. 666 is the sign of the man. I get into that too. This, what they do, what the elites do, is they take these ancient symbols and sigils and they invert it slightly and they pervert it. This is literally just a Hindu mudra when you twist it. That's all it is.
Hmm.
So here's the thing. I always talk about, when you talk about etymology or things of that nature, the power in the word is in its original use. So, for example, when you see Jay-Z doing this, right? When you see them doing this, okay, this is not an Illuminati symbol. If you've ever seen Spock doing this in Star Trek or whatever, right? When you do this and you put it together, which is where it comes from, this is known as the benediction. This was an ancient Jewish Kohanim priest blessing they put on the congregation. That's the original of the word. Just like this isn't the devil horns. The Italian women have been doing this forever. This fights off the Maloki. All these original hand symbols and everything have been inverted and perverted, and that people like Isaac Weishaupt and everybody just point them out, but they don't do anything. They don't look at the history of it. They don't understand where it comes from. They just point it out, and that doesn't accomplish anything. You have to expose this stuff, right? You guys with me?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So the white Jesus, his face, that stereotypical face, is actually a guy named Caesar Borgia. He was the bastard son of Pope Alexander VI. Now, Rodrigo Borgia, from the Borgia Illuminati 13 families, bought his way to the papacy. And he had a son. And he had a daughter, too. Because popes have kids. They just don't get married. That's why all the kids are bastards. And that's what they still do in the church. Now, Pope Alexander VI became pope about 80 years or so after the printing press came out. So he decided his son was going to be the face of it. This guy is basically Hunter Biden. He killed his brother and he slept with his sister. That's Caesar Borgia. That's the face of Jesus. In fact, before the Shroud of Turin was even discovered in 525 AD, Jesus was shown as a young beardless man. Now, the crown of thorns wrapped around the heart on the outside, and the heart is always, always on the outside for Jesus, represents the rays of the sun. The heart represents the toroidal field. Do you remember how I told you guys this book is also alchemical?
Yeah.
Okay, let me give you an example of that. You know how Jesus is always wearing white and red? You ever wonder why? It's alchemy. It's literally alchemy. When you mix red and white, it's called the marriage of the red king and the white queen in alchemy. But to basically boil it down and not make it sound too crazy, it's just what happens when you mix sulfur and mercury. It's just everything is spiritual, guys. Everything is spiritual. It's just been dumbed down for the population. These are a bunch of pictures of Jesus. Right here. The sun, the sun, the sun, the sun. Behind his head. Sometimes, like in the second picture, there's a Knights Templar cross there. The fingers. The holes in his hand is incorrect, by the way. That's not how they crucified people. If I were to take one of you guys and Lobsta, I think a lot of people would love to crucify you. But if I were to crucify you, and I put you up on a cross and I put it through your hands, what would happen is after a little bit of time, your hands would slide through and you would fall forward. They did it through your wrists. Okay, so this is just an incorrect interpretation. But it's all the same face. This is
Micah, I want to show you this picture here. I don't know. Can you see the screen?
I can in a sec. Hold on. Let me pull it up.
Yeah, this is the hand symbology that I was talking about. That it's always in this Greek Orthodox church. Yeah. Any meaning to that?
The left.
It's just like the ring finger, and it's always affixed to the thumb. And they're doing a lot of this kind of weird symbology, and it's all throughout the church.
If I haven't gone too deep into this, but from what I do, I'm just put it back up a second.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. All right. What you're basically looking at is the reason they do this. The reason they do this when they meditate, or the reason they do this, is because it connects veins together. What it does is it makes an energy portal. Okay, that's what they knew. That's what they do. That's all this basically is. In fact, when you see people doing this, right? That's just as above, so below. There's nothing. It's a cult because it's hidden, but there's nothing evil about it. They're just telling you what you see in the heavens will be done on earth. This is just making a connection. The ring finger, the reason we wear wedding rings, has to do with Saturn, because Saturn has rings. And the Jews who worshipped Saturn, right? Saturnalia, everybody knows about Saturnalia. They would wear wedding rings because they pledged their fidelity from the gods. That's why women, for the longest time, wore earrings. They wore earrings because they were told they had to listen to their god. Their god was Saturn, so they put rings in their ears. It's all Saturn.
Wow.
There's a vein that comes from your directly from your ring finger that goes into your heart. You know, I could tell you guys so many different stories. I could tell you this story right here, right? So when you get married, right? You're gonna put your fingers together and you're gonna put a heart in the middle, right? Because it's made with love. Now, what happens when you get married? This is how the Japanese explain this to you, right? This is why Japanese tell you wear ring fingers. When you do this, okay? Now, this right here are your parents, because one day you're gonna grow up and move out, so you separate from them. This right here are your siblings, because one day you're going to grow up and you're going to move away from each other, so the fingers separate. This finger, right, represents your children, because one day, your kids are going to grow up and they're going to move out. But the ring finger symbolizes your wedding. So if you guys do this together, right, try and remove your wedding fingers. You can't separate them. That's how the Japanese tell you this. It's all metaphors. It's all deeply encoded, and people just have no idea just how deep things are. And things are kept at the lowest level of intelligence. So,
Do you think things are
what's up?
like, even though these things originate at this weird metaphorical level, I feel like there's some kind of like consistency in our universe or whatever people will, that this now becomes real, where as
Yes.
before it's kind of like something
Yes.
we're telling people. Now everyone's doing it.
Yes.
We don't know why, but
Yes.
it's probably even more real because more people are doing it.
Everything is benevolent. Every original hand symbol and everything comes from a very ancient Gnostic or Kemetic wisdom, Hermetic even. This is ancient wisdom. And what happens is they're slightly inverted. The swastika, right? Everyone talks about the swastika. It was a Hindu Buddhist sign. It was this, it was that. Before the Nazis took it, all the Nazis did was mirror flipped it. That's all they did. They inverted it and perverted it. The swastika is astrology. If you take the Big Dipper and you rotate it around Polaris on the solstices and the equinox, it forms a swastika. This is all still just astrology. The way you get back to heaven on earth is to expose the lies and the crap that they feed you constantly. Because the original meaning of things is still there, but you can attribute new meanings to things over time, and then it gets forgotten. You know, that's my problem with most of conspiracy Twitter. All you're doing is pointing things out. You're not making changes. You're not explaining the history of things. You're not making cases against things. No one's making cases against anything.
I'm just
You know what I mean?
trying to say the N-word, Micah. I mean, come on. Let's get real here, guys. Jesus Christ. That's a lot of responsibility.
Micah,
I agree with you though, man. Yeah, this, you know, I don't know. It's not my thing, but people like you are doing it. So let's continue with this presentation. I'll pull you back up here.
Let me know when I'm up because I can't see.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Baby Jesus. Pictures of baby Jesus. Notice the alchemical clothing again. Notice the sun behind his head. Notice in each one of these pictures there's a very bright visible star. That is Polaris, our North Star. At the end of this, I'm going to break down that picture on the left because there's 8 astrological signs in there. But remember how I told you that the heart represents the human toroidal field? This is what it looks like. It's an electromagnetic field of the heart. It's kind of like an apple. Basically, what it does is it circumvents you 6 feet. So, if you and Raven were in a room together and Raven came up behind you, you would know he's there. That doesn't make you a magician. He just broke your toroidal field. The toroidal field circumvents you 6 feet. This is why the elites kept you 6 feet apart during the pandemic, because they wanted to isolate you. Because the people at the very top know this. They know the science. The science doesn't change. When you're interacting with someone, it forms a vesica Pisces, just like this. Now, the guy on the left is Jesus. The guy on the right is Caesar Borgia. They're not identical, but you see where they get the features from. And I could find better pictures of Caesar Borgia. That was just a quick one that I found. Now, before the Shroud of Turin was discovered in 525 AD, almost all paintings and drawings of Jesus were shown as a beardless young man. How interesting. So, let me start breaking down scripture with the cipher and show you just how easy this works. So, in Proverbs 16:18, there's that famous saying, pride comes before the fall. Now, any Christian will tell you that that simply means that if you're too boastful or if you're not humble enough, you're setting yourself up for failure. And that's the literal translation. But in astrology, a group of lions is called a pride. Pride is the lion. Lion is Leo. Leo is in July and August. That actually comes right before the fall. In Micah 5:2, but you, Bethlehem Ephratah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from ancient times. This is why I don't get into a lot of arguments with Christians, because I grew up Jewish. I can read Hebrew. I can break down the words. I can understand that. Y'all, they can't. So they're fighting with one arm behind their back. Bethlehem. So this is apparently the passage where Micah, the prophet, says that the prophet's going to, or the savior's going to come from Bethlehem. However, this is also encoded. Bethlehem is two words in Hebrew. Bet means house, and lechem means bread. So it's the house of bread. Well, if I show you this, right? Each zodiac sign is called a house. Virgo would be the house of bread. So what this is actually telling you, if you understand astrology, is that the savior will come from a virgin. This is how deeply encoded this stuff is. Now, in Deuteronomy 32, he gave them honey from the cliffs and olive oil from the rocky ground. He gave his people butter from the herd and milk from the flock. He gave them lambs and goats. They had the best rams from Bashan and the finest wheat. They drank the best wine made from the juice of red grapes. But Jeshurun became fat and kicked like a bull. So even people who literally are just first understanding this up to this point can recognize the words, or a couple of the words, that I've already alluded to in the 12 signs. But let's break this down, because there's 10 signs. He gave them honey from the cliffs. Now, in the sign Cancer, there is a group of stars called the Beehive Cluster. That's where the honey comes from. It's just metaphors. Now, incidentally, the olive oil, we know that's Libra. That's when the olive oil is made. That's when the olives are crushed. Milk from the flock. The milk comes from the Milky Way galaxy. Now, the Milky Way galaxy, I've traced back. It was literally called that in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. So it was ripped directly from, the Jews ripped directly from the Egyptians. But here's the interesting thing, guys. The Beehive clusters in Cancer. The first day of Cancer is the summer solstice, the beginning of summer. The Milky Way galaxy's center is in Sagittarius, right? The man on the horse with the bow and the arrow. The last day of Sagittarius is the first day of winter. So from the beginning of summer to the end of winter, the right half of the zodiac, that's your land of milk and honey. It's as above, so below. It's in the air. It's in the heavens. It's not on earth. There's not a literal river of milk and honey. This is literally just half a year. He gave them lambs. Well, lambs are Aries, and goats Capricorn. They had the best rams from Bashan. Well, again, ram is Aries. And the finest wheat. Well, that's the lady with the wheat stalk. That's Virgo. They drank the best wine. That's Libra with the wine from the juice of red grapes. But Jeshurun became fat and kicked like a bull. The bull is Taurus. There's 10 signs in Deuteronomy 32. And people have no idea when they read it. They take this literally. Now, I'm going to show you how this works when we start using the zodiac to make patterns. Because I gave you a couple examples. You're starting to see how I put the case together. So, Jesus led his disciples to the Mount of Olives after his last Passover so that he could teach them a few more things. Pray, then wait for Judas to betray him. While walking to the Mount of Olives, he gave the parable of the true vine. Now, Passover takes place in Aries, as I've just mentioned. Where right after that, he walks to the Mount of Olives. The olives is over Libra. So look at the zodiac wheel. Aries is all the way at the left. And Libra in olives is literally across from it. So you go from Aries to Libra, that's going across the wheel. Now they're in Libra. While in Libra, they're waiting for Judas to betray him. And who's the betrayer? That's Scorpio, the next sign. Right? So You go from Aries to Libra. You're waiting for Scorpio. While he's in Libra, he gives the parable of the true vine. That has to do with grapes, which has to do with wine, which has to do with Libra. This is how you make patterns. And the Bible is full of these kind of patterns that just map out the heavens. Not only that, but I'm not sitting here talking about like Gemini twins. I'm not giving you a passage about twins and then a passage of a goat where there's no pattern. Not only do they make patterns, but it'll always be the opposing sign or the connecting sign. So, for example, if you're looking at Aries all the way at the left, its opposing sign is Libra. Just follow it across. Aries connecting signs are Pisces and Taurus. It will always make this pattern.
You know what's interesting?
Yeah.
So like the color wheel, very similar sort of pattern that you would follow. Directly across would be your complementary, and then like, you know, to the left and right of whatever color you're working on initially is something
Where
that
do you think
would,
it comes from? It all generates from it. Absolutely.
Circle of fifths, very similar technique. If you're trying to like build something melodic or
well, you're an artist. I mean, you're a graphic designer, right? You're an artist. Like I knew you would jump in with that. It's true. Wait till you realize that the rainbow is the chakras. There's a reason for that. There's a reason that, so at the top chakras, I get into this later, but at the top chakras, that's when you see God. That's when you're enlightened. You have your pineal gland. That's when you're enlightened too. They try and keep you, religion and everything tries to keep you in your lower chakras. Your lowest chakras are red and yellow. Those are the two bottom chakras. That's why every single fast food piece of shit restaurant out there has red and yellow colors, because everything is spiritual and you don't know what you're looking at. So, Genesis 1:7. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. So I hate to tell this to flat earth people, but the firmament is not a dome over a flat earth. It's not. The firmament, let me just show you this real quick. Here we go. Let's go back to here. You see the dividing lines between signs?
Yep.
Okay. Those don't actually exist. You're not looking at the sky when you look into the heavens. Like the lines don't exist to separate. What those represent is a 3-day period on either side of the sign. Some people call them cusps. Some people call them handover dates. What it is an energy handover. It's a 3-day period on each sign. Okay? So knowing that, when I go back to here, if I could find it quick enough. Here we go. God made the firmament and divided the waters which are under the firmament from the waters which are above the firmament, and it was so. Well, the two water signs are Aquarius and Pisces. Aquarius has the water in it, and Pisces is actually a water sign. Well, there's the firmament right there in the middle that divides the waters from above and the firmament from below. There are people out there that actually think there is a body of water in the heavens. It's not. It's not how this works. This all follows the same pattern. And again, when people try to use apologetics or try and like get me with those gotcha moments, understand this as I understand all your arguments. And at the same time, when you're using things like apologetics or you're running in circles trying to explain things and you're just diving deep, I'm using 12 signs to break down everything. And as you'll notice, I'm going from book to book to book. I'm just jumping around to show you it's in everything. It's even
so why are they putting this stuff where they're putting this? Like, what's the point of putting this here in Genesis 7?
Because this is how everything is done. Everything is done in a worshiping manner. You can think of it like this, right? Like you went to school, like you're a graphic designer, like that's your bread and butter. That's how you make money. That's how you feed your family. That's what you do. That's your skill, and you do it as well as you possibly can. That's how you honor God. This is what people did back then. They were very deeply encoding things on multiple levels because that's what they did. What they figured out, they encoded. Because Jesus will tell you in the Bible himself, don't toss pearls to swine. Because there's a great amount of people whose heads will explode when they discover this. Or they just can't. They just can't. There's a lot of people that can't. I told you what happened to me when I discovered it. This is as occult as it gets.
I want to ask you, you mentioned before, I don't want to get too far away from it while it's still fresh in my mind. You were talking about the chakras, right? And the different colors associated with them. And I wanted to get your opinion on this notion that I've come across where the LGBTQ community has inverted the chakras. And so they've put on their flag the color of the root chakra as being the top of the flag. Is there any validity to that? Are you familiar with that?
that would only make sense if high occult priests who are against that set it up. But again, what do I say? You just like with the swastika, you just slightly invert it, and you pervert the meaning.
I think
What is
I
the
think
rainbow? The rainbow is God's promise not to flood the earth again, right? That's what a lot of people, and they're stuck on that division. God's promise not to flood the earth again. The rainbow flag.
yeah, I think that question might go more into like somatics and vibration because
Oh, dude, wait till you find out. I have a video on my YouTube channel. There was a lady that went to a church, and what she did is, you know how like in the church in the middle there's a pew and then there's like a microphone,
yeah,
right? Okay, so what she did was she recorded the silence because it was an empty church. Now tell me that the ancients didn't know more than we did, and we don't give them credit. She went into a church and she recorded the silence, and then what she did was she continued to play the silence through the speakers and re-record over it and re-record over it until eventually it made a somatic pattern on the sand. When it made a pure somatic pattern on the sand that she had brought in, she noticed that the pattern that it made on the sand was the exact same glass mosaic on the window.
Jesus Christ.
Okay, now how the fuck are we going to say that the ancients didn't have... There's a thing called chronological ethnocentrism, which is pushed, okay, and it's a social science term. And what it basically means is it's what it sounds like. It basically says the people before us are dumb. That's all it basically says in a crude way. And that's not the case at all. They knew shit that couldn't possibly do. And one of the ways how to encode a book this deeply with all the wisdom in it, and basically, from what I teach, just map out the heavens. But I will get to the chakras because that's what the 144,000 are. I'll explain that to you. But basically, let me show you this one. This one's good too. Revelation 4:7. The first living creature was like a lion. The second was like an ox. The third had a face like a man. The fourth was like a flying eagle. I have to say, there's people that think this is going to be a real animal in the sky during the end of times when the trumpet blows. The first living creature was like a lion, that's Leo. The second was like an ox, that's Taurus, the bull. The third had a face like a man, that's Aquarius. The fourth was like a flying eagle. I have to explain the eagle to you. But in astrology, this is deeper level astrology, but in astrology, the Scorpio scorpion is the belly crawling creature. Right? It crawls on its belly. It's a lowest form of life on earth. It's a punishment.
Like the snake.
Exactly. I was just going to talk about the Garden of Eden. What's the first thing God does to the snake after the deception? He takes his legs away to make him slither on his belly. In Mexico, there's Santo de la Muerte, right? Men dress up in suits, get on their hands and knees and crawl on their belly to church. However, in astrology, the scorpion is the lowest form of life on earth, especially because it's the betrayer. However, its evolved form, also known as the ascendant, is the eagle. And the eagle is the highest flying form of life on earth. So you have the lowest form of life on earth and the highest form of life on earth. The eagle evolves one more time, and it becomes the phoenix. And what is the story of the phoenix? It's the same thing. It's the sun, right? It's a flaming ball of life that metaphorically dies and is reborn from its ashes, just like the story I just told you. So now you have Leo, Taurus, Aquarius, and Scorpio. Those are the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. You have 3 different kinds of signs in the zodiac. You have 12 signs. You have 3 different signs, so there's 4 seasons. The first sign in the season is known as the cardinal sign. That's why there's cardinals in church. If you take these 30-day signs and you break them down, you can break them down into 3 10-day segments called deacons. This is why you have deacons and cardinals in church. It's all astrology. They just don't want you to know this. The first sign is the cardinal sign. The second sign is the fixed sign. The third sign is the mutable sign. I'm not going to go into that deeper because it's irrelevant, but let me ask you a question. What is more realistic? That the 4-headed animal is going to come out during the end of times to destroy us? Or if you look at Leo, Lion, and Aquarius, those are opposing signs. That's a pattern we've been talking about. Taurus and the eagle or Scorpio, those are opposing signs. Guys, use your minds. Use your brain. What makes more sense? Is it a 4-headed animal or is it just making a cross through the wheel?
Yeah, but why?
Because it's mapping out the heavens. It's different ways to... this is how they glorify God, the 12 signs. They've been doing it for 17,000 years. They don't want you to know. They're just encoding it with cute little tricks so that you can map out the heavens. You can't deny it. I mean, this is from an astrological point of view. Ezekiel 10:14, it's the same shit. Each of the cherubim had 4 faces. One face was that of a cherub. The second was the face of a human being. The third had a face of a lion. The fourth, the face of an eagle. Revelation 12. I'll stay with Revelation for a minute. A great sign appeared in heaven. This is so silly to say, but Raven, from an astrological point of view, the Bible is an encoded heavens poetry book that people take literally. That's all it is from an astrological point of view. That people take literally. Now, a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to earth. A woman clothed with the sun is the sun in Virgo. It is a metaphor for the sun being in the woman sign. Now, if the sun is in Virgo, the moon will be at her feet, right? So the sun is out right now. It's blaring on me, but the sun is out right now. There's 24 hours in the day. There's 12 zodiac signs. So if you just do simple math, you know that the sun is in each sign for 2 hours a day. And if you follow the zodiac wheel and you follow the clock, the sky clock, the sun in Virgo is between 4 and 6 p.m. The sun is still out. Literally right now. It's 4:50. Sun is still out. If the sun is out, the moon is at her feet. It's a metaphor. Whereas if the moon is up, the sun is at her feet. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous dragon. Its tail swept a third of the stars and flung them to earth. Look at the dragon, Draco, on the left, and the tail. Its tail goes from Aries to Sagittarius, which is a third of the stars out of the sky. This is star poetry, guys. This is deeply encoded star poetry. Revelation 7:4. This is where we're talking about the chakras. Then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from the tribes of Israel. Well, what is the 144,000? Well, the Jehovah's Witnesses believe that only 144,000 are predestined to go to heaven. I guess heaven has an occupancy limit. But you got to understand, too, is that the Bible also, or the Jews who wrote, again, the Jews wrote the Old and the New Testament, right? The Jews borrowed from Hindu, too. If you look at Abram, which was Abraham, that was his name before the sacrifice, and Sarah, that goes back to Brahma and Saraswati. So they borrow from Hindu. This is the 144,000, right? That people go nuts about. There are 7 chakras. The root has 4 petals. The sacral has 6. The solar plexus has 10. The heart has 12. And the throat has 16, which equals 48. The third eye chakra is represented by 96 and only has 2 petals because it's 2 times as powerful as the lower chakras. So 48 times 2 equals 96. The crown chakra is 1,000 times more powerful than the lower 6 chakras. When you add the lower 6, you get 96 plus 48 equals 144. Times that by 1,000, you get your 144,000. What they're telling you is about the 144,000 who were sealed. 144,000 is that when you have activated all your chakras and you've activated your crown chakra, that is when you become enlightened and get to go see God. You see how deep these people were, and we don't give them any sort of credit. We just think that they're little fucking, sand lunatics. But they're not. Matthew 10:16, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. This is another famous one. Well, the sheep is Aries, and the wolf is a constellation Lupus, which borders the Libra line. Forms a pattern. And a lot of Christians are going to sit there and ask, yes, I am using the 12 zodiac signs, and I'm using Ptolemy's list of 48 constellations that they knew about, because we know there's 88 now, but they knew about 48 at the time. Not one of these constellations that I mentioned, not one, was not known at the time. So I've given examples of astrotheology in the Old Testament as well as the New Testament. I've been accused of cherry-picking verses from the Bible to prove a point. So let's take a much longer passage, see if we can decode it as well. This comes to the book.
That's actually a question I had too. So yeah, so you are, as you're reading through the Bible, there's a lot of shit in the Bible, which is why there's 10 sciences that could kind of break it down probably separately and maybe never even touch a verse that you've touched. How do you feel about all the stuff in between?
Like what? Give me an example.
Like everything else in between. So you're finding a lot of the worship of the stars here, or the worship of astrology. But like,
Right.
how about just the other things?
Um, how about this? When I get through the end of this, I'll go back to that image of the sciences and I'll give you an example of all of them.
All right.
You can remind me, right? You'll remember?
Probably not.
Write it down. Write it down.
I'll message you though. We'll figure it out.
All right. So this brings me to the book of Job. Now, you have to understand is that the book of Job is the oldest book in the Bible. It is not Genesis. It was put in its order in something called the Synod of Jamnia, or the Senate of Jamnia, which was in 100 AD. Now, what was that? What was that? It was a bunch of politicians and Jews, because at 100 AD, literally 100 AD, the Old Testament was not canonized. So people were reading them out of order. They didn't set an order to it. The book of Job is easily the oldest book. So, and an interesting thing too is that 30 years prior, 70 AD, right around the time of the destruction of the Second Temple in Israel, right? A gospel came out, the Gospel of Mark, which is the oldest gospel. And at the Senate of Jamnia, the Jewish rabbis and the politicians deliberated whether or not to put the Gospel of Mark in the Old Testament. So, knowing that, what is the story of Job? He's just an old dude who's very faithful to God. He has a lot of money, land, women, or family, I should say. Satan goes up to God and says, look, he's only faithful because he has everything. If you start taking things away from him, he will curse you. And God actually takes him on that bet and tells Satan, you can do whatever you want to him, but you may not take his life. That is the only caveat. Little by little, he starts losing things. Things die. Things run away. And at one point, he's sitting there with like boils on a rock, and he's calling out to God for a very long period of time. God actually replies to him, responds to him. What I'm going to read you is God's reply to Job. Okay? The first thing he says is, can you lead forth the Mazaroth? Now, it's very intentionally untranslated in Hebrew and in the Christian King James Bible. The Mazaroth is actually the zodiac. The first thing he says is, can you lead forth the zodiac? Mazaroth over time becomes Mazalot, which survives in Judaism today as Mazel Tov. Mazel Tov means good fortune from the stars. That's where it comes from. Mazel Tov comes from the zodiac. The Lord's challenge to Job. Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Well, I'm talking about celestial metaphors. Here's two open ones, but the rest are encoded. Can you bring forth the constellations in their seasons, or lead out the bear with its cubs? The constellations are zodiac above, and the bear and its cubs are Ursa Major, the Great Bear, and Ursa Minor, part of the Big Dipper. Who can tip over the water jars of heaven? Well, it's Aquarius. It's literally a man tipping over the water jar in heaven, and it's Aquarius. Do you hunt the prey for the lioness and satisfy the hunger of the lions? That's Leo. Who provides food for the raven? The constellation Corvus, which means raven, borders on Virgo. Do you watch where the doe bears her fawn? Mariga, meaning deer, is located in Orion. Who let the wild donkey go free? That's Acellus Borealis, meaning donkey, and is located in Cancer. Will the wild ox consent to serve you? That's Taurus. The wings of the ostrich flap joyfully. That's Lambda Achille, or Al Thaliman, which means two ostriches in Arabic. Do you give the horse? So right here, who's the horse? That's Sagittarius. We know that's Sagittarius right away, but let's see if it adds to it. Do you give the horse its strength? It laughs at fear, afraid of nothing. It does not shy away from the sword. The quiver. Well, okay, well, what is the quiver? That's what holds the arrows, right? Sagittarius is the man on the horse with the bow and the arrow. So we know that's Sagittarius. Does the eagle soar at your command and build its nest on high? Aquila is the Latin name for eagle and is a constellation a few degrees above the celestial equator. So you have the evolved form of Scorpio as the eagle, and you have Aquila, which is the eagle. You have other things that are multiple in the Bible too sometimes when you're talking about the serpent. You have Ophiuchus, which is the 13th sign, which is the serpent bearer. You have Hydra, which is the sea serpent, and it depends on which one they used, because you will find a pattern. You will find 4, 5, 6, 7 signs in a row when you do this. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fish hook? That's Pisces. That is literally. That's what God says to Job. I'm gonna run to the bathroom real quick. Can I give you guys a minute?
Yeah. I actually, man, I had a question to ask you, but go ahead.
All right.
I have to put a pin in it. Okay. What are you thinking, man?
So it's a lot of stuff, right? I want to let him get through his presentation, and then the question that's really itching in my mind is, and I think you and I both share this in common, is how the fuck do the Nephilim plug into this? Where is the room for the paranormal? That's what I want to know. Is what are his opinions on the paranormal and how it keys into this? Because I'm of the school of thought of, you're familiar with my experiences and everything. They flavor the lens that I see everything through. So I'm like, how do you quantify that? How do you compartmentalize these things? How does the paranormal fit into all this? And then hopefully we have enough time to ask him how these Mexican aliens, not the you know which ones, the new ones, the ones they just came out with, the ones that just dropped.
The good
How
ones.
do
The
they fit
good
into
ones.
this?
Yeah, that's what one of the things that did run through my mind is that like you were telling me on the last episode you were on me, when something was happening to you, you just called on the name of Jesus and stopped immediately. Not the first time I've heard that. So if this is all sun worship and kind of like trickery, here he's coming back. Then where does that land you? That's
Right.
a question. What I wanted to ask you, Micah, was so there are other books in the Bible that
Yeah.
have not been included in the canon.
Yeah.
Do you think like the Catholic Church or the people who originally put together the Bible, they obviously knew about what you're talking about?
I mean, look, I'm what? I'm a third of the way through my presentation. Like, do you agree at this point that there's definitely astrology in it?
Yeah, no, there is definitely symbology of astrology. What I'm asking you is like, so do you think the Pope like believes, what does he believe? Is
The
he like
Pope,
a?
the Black Pope, the Gray Pope. I think they all know at the top.
I think they all know. Is it, you think there's a reason why some books are excluded? Like maybe it doesn't adhere.
See, I thought I studied the Gnostic text, for example, Book of Enoch, for example, things of that nature, and I was trying to make that argument. I was like, what do these have that are different than the other? Why would they exclude certain things? And then when I went through each and every one of them, like I do in my second presentation, and I find that it's all encoded the second way, I'm just baffled. It must be the way that it reads literally, to be honest with you. I know, for example, the Book of Enoch, right? They openly talk about astrology.
Yeah.
So maybe that was removed for that reason. And they talk about obviously the Nephilim and all that stuff. But
What are your thoughts on that? Literal or just more symbology?
I don't know. It's really not my expertise, to be honest with you. But it's possible. I do think there's giants. I mean, there are giants. We know that there were giants. I kind of flip flop between this idea because, like, you ever see those really tall motherfuckers, like 7'6", 7'8", and they're just sitting there looking all goofy, but they have a cane because they can't walk because their bones don't fucking support their weight system.
Yeah,
right.
Like Abraham Lincoln.
It's the same thing. Like, how are you going to triple the size of that unless, I don't know. You think something three times as big as like Shaq came around and just like fucked a girl? I don't think that's how it works.
Watch it.
Well, like, the story
I'd
went.
watch it.
The story, yeah, I'd watch it. Show me that porn. The story goes is that the fallen angels did that and then created these people. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to think about, especially under when you put these different scientific lenses over it.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with the story. But continue your. I have your.
I
your
also do have a
PowerPoint.
question since we're literally
Yeah.
just talking about that. I do have to understand this because I don't watch porn anymore, but I want to know when I used to. I want to know why every single black girl was always fucked by some bald white dude.
That is a good point. Yeah, why don't black guys fuck? I assume that there is a section of porn where black guys fuck black girls, but I would never look at that, so I couldn't even tell you.
I just don't understand.
No,
By the way,
I want to ask you because you obviously your worldview is in great deal through this lens. Where and how do you place the paranormal in this, if you do at all?
Um, Oh, Lord, that is a great question. So I'm going to explain to you guys in this presentation what hell, Satan, Lucifer, and Baphomet all come from. I'm going to explain that to you. And
Before
what
you
I'm going
do
to tell
that,
you is answer you. Right.
forget about Satan, Lucifer, and all that. Have you ever had any kind of paranormal experiences yourself? Not just
Believe
aliens,
it or
but
not,
like,
believe it or not, no, not really. They kind of leave me
good,
alone.
good for you.
They
Good
kind of
for you,
leave me
man.
alone. Yeah, no. Here's the thing. The Bible is, you know how in a movie, I know Hollywood sucks, but like in a movie, they say things like based on a true story. So they take liberties with what actually happened and made it more fantastical. And so, like, the places in the Bible exist. Obviously, the places really existed. But I think that the people, the characters, they're characters, and they're archetypes. You know, some might be Jungian, for example, Jesus, the hero, right? But some are just basic archetypes. I think that they're stand-ins for full disclosure. I know for a fact that there are demons that are real. Demons are real, the good and the bad. In Isaiah 45:7, they tell you this. God says, I created the good and the bad. I created the good and the evil. I created the light and the dark. I, the Lord, do all these things. It makes sense. But I think they're, in the Bible, they're trying to describe things they don't understand, um, in a
So
certain
Mika,
level. Because,
I've had experiences, personal experiences, and mine's not unique, right? You'll find plenty of these descriptives, but basically where I had no religious
Top, is he going
background
to tell me about his
whatsoever.
anal probe experience right now?
Yeah, yeah. Just
Well,
hold
I
tight.
was going to, but if we don't want to talk about the butt stuff, we don't have to talk about the butt stuff. I guess I'm more comfortable
No, no,
not
no, no,
talking
no.
about it. Let me
Continue,
switch over to a
continue.
different one. So basically, I had an experience where I saw something and it fucked me up so bad that even though I wasn't a Christian, and I'm still not a Christian, but I do have sort of a relationship with Christ because it was the only thing that saved me in that moment. Like it was this thing that wouldn't fucking go away.
Right.
And my wife saw it as well. My son saw it as well. It became a huge problem. And there's no shortage of people out there who invoke the name of Christ to rid themselves of these experiences. And so, do you leave room in your worldview for the paranormal? It doesn't sound like you outright dismiss it, and you even said that it's your belief that there are
No, it
demons, or
exists.
that.
It 100% exists. It 100% exists.
So then
I
why do
talked
they
to
flee?
a pretty well-known demonologist.
Sorry, yeah.
What did I tell you
Why would they
about
flee at the name of Jesus? You know, if
why did, okay,
Jesus is an
okay, I
allegory for the
explained that.
Son.
So let me give you an example. Okay, let's talk about like an exorcism, for example. You know, why if this is an astrology book or just a bunch of other things, why does that work? Why does Jesus work? Let's even take it further. Why does Jesus come to so many people as they're dying? Why? Or when they die, when they come? And here's what I can explain best to my ability. He's an archetype. Jesus is an archetype. What did I just tell you before about slightly inverting something and changing its meaning? But the original meaning comes forth, and that's where the power is, right? The demons and the people who are doing the exorcism, having the exorcism, it's called the placebo effect. There's a reason studies have to have them. And in fact, when it comes to Jesus, the reason if he's the son, why does he come to so many people? Well, because you know what he looks like, because you've seen his picture constantly. And on top of which, a lot of beings that come to help you transition. Remember, your pineal gland leaks DMT into your body twice in life. Well, more than twice, but only on 2 occasions. When you're sleeping in REM sleep every night, it causes you to dream. And as your body is shutting down and you're dying, your body gets flooded with DMT. Okay? It's a trip. But what happens is these entities come to help guide you to the next place. And they come as family members or Jesus as loved ones that you are comfortable with. Because people think it's a crutch. But people don't understand how deep and encoded and what they're really trying to tell you.
Are these the archons?
That I don't
Yeah.
know.
Okay.
Because I do hear a lot of that, right? It's this
Um,
idea that and it's fucking deeply disturbing. It's like when you pass away, that you're actually being deceived when you're greeted by loved ones or by figures of Jesus, and that this light that they lead you into is this fucking almost slave-esque reincarnation loop. And I've heard that, and I've looked into that a
yeah,
little bit, and
that's what I've heard too. I've heard it even further. I've
I've
heard
had
that the light is
I,
actually you coming out of your mother's vagina, as Trump would say, and seeing the light in the hospital room.
she had a cat named Vagina. I had a theory that ran through my head the other night. It's just I was like,
Did I send you
how
that
we have
clip?
the phenomenon, the cat named
Yeah,
Vagina. Oh yeah, I've
yeah,
seen that. Yeah, it's retarded. It's great. We need him back on Twitter or X. But
we do.
the thing that ran through my head was the idea of the NPC and how many there actually are. How
There
many
are.
actual
That's true.
people are on Earth?
Yep.
Like 8 billion or something like that. Whatever sounds kind
Right.
of high. Like, are there enough spirits or souls to occupy all these people, or are we
Let me
just
put it
like
to you this way. Let me
a
put it
couple
to you this way.
million, right? You know?
I've done, yeah. The NPC thing is a real thing, 100%. Um, in fact, 50%. There've been studies done. 50 up to 50 freaking percent of the entire world's population does not have an inner monologue. And I made a
Yeah.
video of this on my channel, and I had someone email me, and they were like, "Look, I am one of those people. This is how I go through my day to day." And I was like, "Holy shit! I'll send it to you, dude. It'll blow your mind."
Yeah. There's a
dude, that's
lot of
crazy.
people. A lot of
Yeah,
people
I didn't
can't
think that that
draw
was
an
real.
apple in their head. I think it's even higher. The
Yeah.
ones that can't picture like what an
Mm-hmm.
apple would look like. It blows my mind,
Right.
but yeah. So we're just I get that feeling all the time where it's like we're just walking out here and these people are just fucking place fillers. Like, and there's
Yeah.
only a couple
Yeah.
of us that keep on swapping souls until
Yeah.
maybe we don't go. I have no clue. Maybe there's only
The way that
144,000 of us.
I think that the people that piss people off the most, who go against the grain, who go against the norm, those people are real. But have you ever heard of the dead internet theory?
Yep. Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing with the dead internet theory. And you can't disprove the dead internet theory. It's
Yeah.
such a
As above,
fascinating, guys who are listening. Yeah, the
as
dead
above,
internet
so
theory is true.
online.
So how the dead internet theory basically goes is they had this video game, right? And it was like a multiplayer game that you had to play with multiplayers, but like not enough people were playing it, so they just built these NPCs in the system to play along with you. And then what happens is they just kept making. We see this in Twitter and everything with the bots. We see it with the bots. You know, this isn't the real world. This isn't the real world.
Yeah.
What I'm teaching is the
Yeah.
real world. You know,
At some point, it's just like bots playing with bots, and that's why I feel like we're getting real close to that. Especially when you drug up an entire society, like probably like 70% of us are on some kind of
dude,
pharmaceuticals.
check this out. 50%. 50% of the OnlyFans chicks are AI created by men for other men to whack off to.
Wild.
50%.
Wild.
50%.
It's wild that that number is that low.
Yeah, right?
I feel
Those
like
men are
that number is
geniuses, though.
higher.
Right? It's
Fuck,
ridiculous.
man.
Mika, I want to throw. I'm going to continuously throw fucking batshit crazy things at you, and you got to tell me if this is too far. These are places that my mind goes,
Uh-huh.
right? And these aren't my own theories. These are obviously just from things that I read and I piece together. But this idea that the 13 Greek gods were actually, the same characters, the fallen from the Bible, is that kind of shit too far? Do you not think that these were physical entities in any real sense, and
It's
that these are
all the
just
same.
allegories?
It's all the same story. You have King Arthur and the 12. You have the 12 zodiac signs, the 12 disciples. You have the 12 months of the year. It's always the same. The 13 is actually when you. So 13 is it's very complicated to explain, but what they'll tell you is that the reason 13 is so bad, or when you start diving into things, what you'll realize is that the church eliminated the Knights Templar on October 13th, Friday the 13th, 1307. That's why 13 is unlucky, right? What 13 really is the true zodiac. That's when you add Ophiuchus into it. Again, like there's many avenues to, well, there's many avenues to take in the Bible. There's different sciences built into it, but the same way that you have what's known as Vedic or sidereal astrology, that's sort of Eastern a little bit. That's when you add Ophiuchus into it. That's more of an accurate one. What we have is tropical astrology. That's what I'm teaching you guys. Now, there are encoded some information from the 13th sign into the Bible, and I think I get into it. I can't really remember, but it's mostly 12. But that's where it comes from. That's where the 13 originates from. The Knights Templar, October 13th, 1307, and the 13th sign. That's where it comes in. Again, you just take something and you just pervert it.
So, all right, I want you to get back to your thing. I got one more retarded question for you, though. What
These
are
aren't
your
retarded
thoughts
questions.
what are your thoughts on 9/11? Because we're just coming hot off the heels of the anniversary, and there's so many people that look at that as this giant symbolic ritual. I know a lot of people. I've heard somebody go on a tangent about how the towers represented the twins. What is it? Gemini is the twins. Am I right in that?
Yes, sir.
And I don't know
I
if
haven't
any of
gotten
that
that
stuff
deep into
actually
it.
applies.
I think that people take astrology a little far sometimes, just because what I really try to do, guys, is I'm explaining a very, very encoded, complicated subject that took me 11 years to get to this point in 2 hours. That's what I'm trying to basically do.
I was just
However,
going to
that being said,
suggest.
there are.
I think a good way to navigate this, and I'm pretty sure that David would be down. Like we can go for a little while longer, but I think now that you've laid the framework, at least on this show, I'm sure you've done it like hundreds of times. You've laid the framework. We can do this discussion again, and really like
Yeah.
continue through the PowerPoint, but also keep on like touching on even current issues or things, like, because it is fascinating when you take your lens of life and put it over something, anything we have a question to. I'm so interested.
So what I've been
anyway,
doing so
yeah.
far, what I've been doing so far is giving you guys biblical passages. And the other thing that I really pride myself on, guys, is I try and make this very concrete. Because there are passages where I see certain things and I'm like, I don't think that will resonate as hard, but I think that the examples that I give, you can't argue. Like I told you, debunkmywork.com. I have 62 ancient holy texts that I've broken down with this cipher. 62. And they're all on my website. Again, no death threats. And nobody's made a debunking video or anything. I try and just keep it really. But what I've done so far is I've given you Bible examples. What I was going to do next, or we could just save it for next time, is what I think I'll do is I'll go through the 12 signs again, so you guys are familiar with the keywords and everything. And then what I'll do next time is I will continue, because now I'm going to get into the book of Matthew, where I'm just going to break down an entire book and show you how it's literally just looping around the zodiac constantly. And then I start getting into historical information, and then I start getting into how entertainment uses it against us. It's wild.
I really want to
And
hear.
that's just my first
I really want to hear
presentation.
that part. I really want to hear the entertainment part. That's like, oh my God, you saved that for third, Micah. Jeez, you know what, man? We gotta.
You have to build the foundation. You gotta. A lot of people's heads are gonna explode. I know people are gonna listen to this, rewind it 1,000 times, pull out their Bible. Please do it. Please do it.
Can you run through Matthew with us real quick? I want to see. I want to see what that looks like.
What I usually do is there's 146 slides, and I break it down into 2. The second half has more slides, but because there's smaller information on it, I'll do the book of Matthew. I'll show you this. So hold on. Oh, let's do this first. Let's get there. Give me 2 seconds, okay, guys? You remember these questions I asked at the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay. How Jesus was able to heal the blind. Well, in the Bible, they'll tell you that the man walked up to him and Jesus licked his fingers, touched his eyes, and he was able to see. But the sun does the same thing too. Because when the sun is up right now, I can see. But when it goes down, I'm blind. But when the sun comes up and touches my eyes in the morning, I'm given the gift of sight. That's just the first example. how he walked on water in the Bible. This is a triple entendre, by the way. This is how deep this goes. How he walked on water. Jesus walked on water. Well, the Son does too. Top, you ever go fishing or bury a body at sea and like see the sun walking along the water?
Yeah, the second one.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying, right? And then Christos. So, guys, Jesus Christ was not his name. First of all, the letter J didn't even come into existence until the English language in 1524. It was the last letter to come in. The letter Z came in before then. In Hebrew, when you use the letter J, like Jonathan or Jacob, in Hebrew, it's Yonatan and Yaakov. It's a Y. In Spanish, it's an H. Jesus. Right? That's what it is. But because the Jews wrote the New Testament in Greek, they called him Jesus Christ. And it's, again, his name wasn't even Jesus. It was, they'll say it was Yeshua. Yeshua is the Hebrew word for Joshua. And they don't even call him that because when he's born, they call him Emmanuel. So they're all over the place. But
Yeah, what the hell does that mean?
Christos, right? His name was not Jesus Christ. His parents were not Mary Christ and Joseph Christ. Christos is a title. And by title, I mean in Greek, which is what the New Testament was written in, Christos means oil or anointed one. And let me ask you a question. For the third example, what happens when you put oil on water?
Yeah, it walks.
Stays on the surface.
This is a triple entendre, guys. How he turned water into wine. I'm going to explain this to you guys because now that we understand the 12 signs, we understand the process, the hero's journey, and things of that nature. Now, how he turned water into wine, this is a process. Now, the reason God is considered a man, and this is where its origination comes from. This is the beginning of it. This is where it comes from. The reason God is always considered male and Mother Earth is considered female has to do with one thing. And this is so ancient, I can't even put a timeline on it. It has to do with the rain, the sacred fluid. In Hebrew, the word is shemen. We get the word semen from it. So think about this metaphorically. God's semen comes on Mother Earth or in Mother Earth, and then plants and food and vegetables and flowers and things grow, right? So what happens? In Taurus, as above, so below, you look up and you see the bowl. Put the plow on the bowl. You plant the grape seeds. And then, again, April showers bring May flowers. It's always been like that, right? So it rains and it rains and it rains. And then in Libra, pick the grapes and you turn it into wine. That's how you turn water into wine. In fact, well, I can't get into that right now yet, but why he had 12 disciples, we went into that. Let me give you a couple more examples, right? So I already told you that Judas was Scorpio, the betrayer, with the kiss. John the Baptist would be Aquarius, the man with the water pitcher baptizing everyone. Gemini, the twins, would be Thomas Didymus. In Hebrew, Ta'om, or Tom, means twin, whereas in Greek, Didymus means twin. So I've given you 3 examples. Now the fourth one that I go into, this is a little harder for people to pick up, but this is why I saved it for last. You have Simon Peter, right? Now, my name is Micah. People call me Mike or Mickey if you know me forever or whatever. Thomas is Tom. Ronald is Ron. These make sense. These are shortened versions of it. Simon to Peter doesn't make sense unless you understand astrology and why it was done. There is no logical reason Simon should become Peter. However,
Wait, Peter is short for Simon, or is a nickname for Simon?
no. His name was Simon, and Jesus called him Peter.
Got you. Okay.
Okay?
Sounds
You
like
have
an
to-
asshole thing to do.
It is an asshole thing to do, but you have to understand astrology. Okay?
I don't like that fucking name. You know what? Fuck your name. I'm gonna give you a new name.
Right? Well, what is
I'll give
Peter?
you a better name.
Peter is a fisherman. That was his job. What's the sign of the fish?
Pisces.
And what is the ruling planet of Pisces? I didn't go over this with you, but it's Jupiter or Jew-Peter. It's just a play on words. So I'm not going to go into all 12 of the zodiac signs, but I just gave you 4 examples. Why he was betrayed with a kiss by Judas, we did that. Why he was dead for 3 days, we did that. Why is his birthday on December 25th, we did that. I told you I'd explain it all. It's all astrology, guys, from the astrological lens of the Bible. Now you
what
want
if
me
all this? What if all this shit is real? What if this is astrologically correct? I mean, it is, but what if this has actually been acted out, like as like a sign of like double power or something?
I don't see. That's what a lot of Christians are going to struggle with. A lot of Christians are going to be like, I can follow you. I get it. I follow you. It makes a lot of sense. But what if this is just a literal, what if this is just playing out? And what I'll tell you is that I go through in my other video 62 or just a bunch of different, everything from the Egyptians, the Sumerians. I already told you Sinai is Sin AI. I already told you that Moses is Tuthmos. They borrow from previous. The story of Noah and the Ark that people love to say that Ron Wyatt found the Ark and shit like that, right? The story of Noah's Ark is literally ripped from the Epic of Gilgamesh, down to the wire, to the point where he sends a bird out and the bird comes back with a branch to show land is there. So these are literally taken from previous stories. This is why, because you can trace all this information from previous things.
So do you think that this whole instance of finding Noah's Ark on the mountaintop, remember they supposedly found remains of an ark
in
or a
Turkey,
ship?
Mount Ararat, Ron Wyatt. Yeah, I want to know why Ron Wyatt was able to find Noah's Ark, why he was able to find chariots and horse bones in the Red Sea, why he was able to find sulfur balls of pure sulfur somewhere in Israel. You know,
What do you suspect is happening there?
I think it's nonsense. I think he's a hack.
You heard it here first, folks.
He's a very convincing hack. He's a very convincing hack. So do you guys want me? Yeah, sorry.
When it comes to the flood mythos in particular, you have people like Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson, and they're showing you the water erosion on the Sphinx, and to them,
I talked about
I
that too.
Does
he also tell you? Does he also tell you that at the age that the Sphinx was made, right, 12,000 years ago, with the water erosion, his theory with that? Did he also tell you that the Sphinx, which is a lion, was facing the constellation Leo at the time, as above, so below?
Yeah, he did, that is what he said, right, or something to that extent. What do you make of the water erosion and the length of time that it would have taken? Because I'm remembering peripherally, but it was something like the amount of rainfall was unprecedented and would have been, of biblical proportions. The amount of water that it was subjected to.
It would have been the melting of the Dryas.
The Younger Dryas.
It would have been the melting of that, and that makes complete sense. The Sphinx, because it was in sand, the back of it should be coarse. Like, what happens when you run sandpaper over something for a short period of time? Imagine eons of doing that, but it's smooth because of the water and because it was buried.
Well, when you run sandpaper over something, it does smooths it out. Yeah, I mean, depending on the grit and grain.
You're right. That was probably a bad example, but I guess I was just
the opposite.
Yeah,
Debunk.
the opposite.
I just debunked your shit.
debunkmyshit.com. Yeah.
So can we run through just a little bit of the Book of Matthew, because I do have to go in a couple of minutes, but I'm interested for this next subject here.
All right.
Oh, and before we do wrap it up, I want to get Micah's just his thoughts on this. What's going on with Mexico? Because, like you said earlier, Top, I'm interested in the lens he sees things through, and so I'd be interested in if you think it's a hoax, if you think it's bullshit, if you think there's some validity to it. But we'll get to that after the Matthew thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, you guys didn't ask this question, but I'm going to answer it anyway because some people who are watching might understand this. This science, the 12 signs and how I explained it, only works for people in the northern hemisphere, and there is a reason for that. The Egyptians, Jews, Christians, Sumerians, Muslims are all based out of the northern hemisphere. For example, June 21st, the summer solstice, is actually the winter solstice in Australia, New Zealand, much of South Africa and South America. So if our holy texts that have survived came from the south, like let's say South Africa, it would be reversed. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so but it doesn't stop there. It's not just random passages in the Bible that could be decoded this way. We're going to go through the entire book of Matthew to show how deep this runs. This is not going to be that long. So we'll stop after this because, to be honest with you, I usually stop after the book of Matthew because I have to break this into two. So, Matthew 3:2. What I've done is I've put a zodiac sign on the left, and I've highlighted it in red so you know where you're looking at. Matthew 3:2. Repent of your sins and turn to God, for the kingdom of heaven is near. Each gospel begins at one of the four major points of the zodiac. I didn't explain this to you guys yet, but you have the zodiac wheel. In the middle of it, straight line down, those are the solstices. These are the equinox. It forms the cross. It's the cross that God's Son carries and is crucified on, and then later comes back to life. So, the kingdom of heaven is Leo, whose ruling planet is the sun. This is the only sign that the sun rules over. The closest of the 4 points is June 21st, which is Cancer, which I've highlighted. This is where the gospel starts. Now, this is the firmament, right? It's the line between them, between Cancer and Leo. It's the beginning of the kingdom. There's a saying in the Bible that says the firmament shows God's handiwork. The firmaments are the dividing lines between signs. Now, the next passage, Matthew 3:4, John's clothes were woven from coarse camel hair, and he wore a leather belt around his waist. For food, he ate locusts and wild honey. So for me, the camel hair and the locusts stand out. But if we take the most famous drawing of a man, Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, and superimpose it onto the zodiac, we can make sense of this. Now, some people are going to say to me that Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man wasn't around when the zodiac came out. And I'm saying I could honestly use a dog from Paw Patrol as long as it's in this, the way it's lined up. See what I've done here now. Cancer, being the head, is why he eats the wild honey. Get it? In Cancer, there is a star cluster called the beehive cluster. Bees produce honey. Now, Leviticus 11, what is clean or unclean to eat? All flying insects that walk on all fours are to be regarded as unclean by you. There are, however, some flying insects that walk on all fours that you may eat. Those that have jointed legs for hopping on the ground. Of those, you may eat any kind of locust. So there it is. Katydid, cricket, or grasshoppers. So, guys, a pound of grasshoppers is 3 times as nutritious as a pound of beef. When the elites are trying to get you to eat bugs, it's biblical. They're ripping it from it. Just know where it comes from, guys. We were in Leo, right, at the start. Now we're in Cancer. That's a pattern because those are connecting signs. Now we're in Gemini. Now we're 3 signs in a row. A little lower down on the body is the clothes made out of camel hair, or Camelopardalis, which is in Gemini. It is a constellation called Camelopardalis. It is broken down into 2 words. Camelos, for camel, and pardalis means leopard. The camel leopard, that's the constellation. The ancients used to call the giraffe Camelopardalis because they looked at this weird-looking thing with spots. It was 40 feet tall, and they're like, that's a camel leopard. That's what they basically said. So that's where that is. So now we have 3 signs in a row. Now we have 4 signs in a row because we're in Taurus. Moving a little lower on the body, you get his midsection, which is where he would wear a belt. Taurus represents the bull and the female is the cow, which is where you would get the leather from. Regarding the belt, Orion's belt sits between Taurus and Gemini. Next would be the baptism. So how are we going to go from the beginning of Leo, where we were, to a water sign to signify the baptism? You would go across the zodiac. Cross signs, or opposing signs, as they are, is what they are known as. Here we see how it jumps from one firmament to the other. The man with the water pitcher in Aquarius is personified as John the Baptist with the water. It is important to note, too, that John the Baptist and Jesus are always exactly 6 months apart. When you think about the fact that Jesus is born on December 25th and rises a degree a day, then that must mean that John the Baptist is born on June 25th and decreases a degree a day. This is why in John 3:30, John says, he must increase, but I must decrease. And guess what? It's also when St. John's Day is. June 24th, 6 months from Jesus. So the next story is the temptation of Jesus. So we're going back to the Cancer Leo firmament. I didn't explain this to you guys yet, but does this make sense to you? Cancer is the crab or the scarab. Leo is the lion, right? So if I'm in Cancer, I can only talk about Cancer. If I'm in Leo, I can only talk about Leo. But if I'm on the firmament and I'm making a connection, I could talk about either. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Sure, you're in
Okay.
between.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Now, the next story is the temptation of Jesus. So we're going back to the Cancer Leo firmament of July 24th. This one is simple. He's tempted for 40 days. So count 40 days from July 24th. Takes you to September 2nd. What is September 2nd? Right in the middle of Virgo, the lady with the wheat stalk, right? But what's the next passage? Matthew 4:3, the devil says, if you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become loaves of bread. Here we see mention of the bread, which tells you that the sun is in Virgo. The next passage, Matthew 5:17 and 22, I did not come to abolish the law. And if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. Well, that's Libra. Now those are connecting signs. Matthew 7:15 and 16, beware of false prophets who come disguised as harmless sheep. There it is. And can you pick grapes from the thorn bushes? That's 7:15 and 16. They mention the sheep, that's Ram in Aries, or baby ram, and the grapes are Libra. Once again, these are opposing signs, so always with the patterns. Moving along, Matthew 13. Later that same day, Jesus left the house and sat beside the lake. The story now moves from Libra to the barrier between Aquarius and Pisces, as he is right beside the lake are the two water signs. Its cross sign is the Leo-Virgo firmament. As it's across from Virgo, the wheat stalks the grains, is it ironic that the next parables from Jesus are the wheat and the weeds, the mustard seed, and the yeast? And then he gives you the fishing net parable. So we literally just go back across the wheel again to Aquarius, Pisces. And since it's touching Pisces, you could talk about the fish. Gemini is the sign of two men, technically twins. However, there's just a short mention of brothers in this next passage. He's just the carpenter's son, and we know Mary, his mother, and his brothers, James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas. This ends at the firmament of Gemini and Cancer. So Gemini is the sign of two men, twins, brothers, right? But we can still talk about Gemini if it's at the firmament between Gemini and Cancer. Well, this is interesting. Because if you take the firmament of Gemini Cancer and you follow it to its cross sign, again, making a distinct pattern, it's the firmament of Sagittarius Capricorn. That's December 21st. Do you guys remember what December 21st represents in the mythology? It's the death. It's the day the sun dies. It's the winter solstice. So what is the next? It's the very next passage. It's the death of John the Baptist. Are you guys starting to see how this works?
Yeah.
Okay? As I've mentioned previously, death comes at the end of Sagittarius. The firmament of Sagittarius Capricorn and the Gemini Cancer are opposing signs. So I just paused and I threw a sentence in there that doesn't belong in the Bible, just to show you how this works. If I say to you, the rulers were divided between war and love, it split the land in half. You could read that as a literal translation, or the ruling planet of Aries is Mars, who is the god of war. The ruling planet of Libra is Venus, who is the goddess of love. There's your war and love. And look, if you connect it, it splits the zodiac or the land in half. This is how they encode their deep metaphors. Matthew 14, 17, and 32. But we only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. The bread and the fish are opposing signs in the zodiac. Pisces, the 2 fish, and Virgo, the lady with the wheat stalk. That's a pattern. And again, Pisces is the 2 fish, which is why Jesus fed the masses with 2 fish. This is the cross of God's son. This is what I was talking about when you cross the solstices and the equinoxes. We were just in Virgo, and now next is Libra, which is law, wine, and oil, remember? What stories do we get now? The stories of the temple tax, the unforgiving debtor, divorce and marriage, and the parable of the vineyard worker. So all the law stuff and the wine stuff. Next is Scorpio, the betrayer. This is where Judas betrays Jesus with the kiss. So we went from Virgo to Libra to Scorpio. So now we just made a pattern in the Bible of 3 signs in a row. And then what happens in Sagittarius? The death, right? Here's where Jesus is crucified on the cross. Now, a lot of Christians are going to sit there and tell me that Jesus wasn't born on December 25th. He was born during the Feast of the Tabernacles. He was born on 9/11. He was born during Passover. He was born, whatever you want to throw at me. And I'm going to tell you, that's fine. That's your interpretation. I'm giving you the science behind it. This is the astrology that makes it. Now, I'm going to end with this. Astrology is a language. If you understand this language, the sky speaks to you. And guys, that's the first half of my presentation.
You said that's the first half?
That's the first third.
Oh,
well,
first,
yeah, but it goes a little quicker at this point.
So I can definitely see that there is some sort of, you said it before, right? The Bible is alchemical. It's many different things. There's so many different ways to interpret it. There's so many different codes kind of within it. And I can definitely see that you've established well enough that there is certainly an astrological code within the Bible. And so I guess that's why this is only 1/3 of your work. Top, do you have any thoughts on what the hell just happened to us?
This is like my third time of this happening to me. So part of me is watching your
It hits
screen.
different when we're talking direct, right?
It is different because yeah, there are times when I have listened to this like I think I was driving a truck probably both times listening to you talk with a
It's
either
better if you
read-
watch it because I made a PowerPoint because a lot of people are visual learners, you know.
Yeah, but as a truck driver, like the best I could do is listen. But there
Right.
are times where I wanted to like interject, and being on shows, sometimes I feel like I can't interject. I'm like, I'm like I'm in my car by myself. But so no, it's been interesting, like being able to talk to you and joke with you about this stuff and kind of like pick on the parts that I wasn't sure of what you were talking about. Really interesting watching David hear the hear this for probably the first time. But yeah, I enjoy this. I enjoy this topic.
Let me give you David. Let me give you an anatomical explanation. Okay, when you said I have a relationship with Christ, Christ is in all of us. All of us. His story is the hero's journey that we all go through. His story that he is children of God, or he's the son of God. We are all a part of God. And I explain that later. But I want you to think about this. There's a centripetal cell in your heart. Not your heart. There's a centripetal cell in your body. It is the absolute midpoint of your body. The ancients knew this. Once a month, it releases an oil. This is the Christ. What happens is the Christ makes its way to your spinal column, right? All 33 bones. That's why there's 33 degrees in masonry. Because at the top level on the 33rd, that's right at the base of your skull. That's where your pineal gland sits. So what happens is the sacred oil travels up the Jordan River, which is your spinal fluid, up Jacob's ladder, the 33 bones, where it's resurrected, or it rests in your pineal gland, and you have a resurrection. That's when you get to go see God. That's when you trip. That's when you're on DMT or mushrooms. I don't know if you guys have ever read Mushroom in the Cross, but it explains how hallucinogenics were built into the Bible too. But that's what it basically is. It goes there, and this is why I tell people never do ecstasy, because you'll never be able to have gnosis. Because what ecstasy does is it dries out your spinal column or your spinal fluid. So that's what it basically does. In fact, they tell you this. Jesus is crucified between two thieves, your left hemisphere and your right hemisphere of your brain. What's in the middle? Your pineal gland. Where's he crucified? In Golgotha. What does Golgotha translate to? The place of the skull. It's all there.
It's really crazy because a lot of people will tell you, outside of atheism, that there's an intelligent design to all this. And I think what you just laid out shows people that not only is there an intelligent design to all this, it is far more intelligent than anybody gives it credit to. Very much
What
in
I
the
try
same
and tell
vein
people, what I try and tell people is, look, I don't have my problem with like the Jews, the Christian, and again, I grew up Jewish. My problem with the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims is not that they're trying to be spiritual. It's that they're taking this stuff literally, and they don't even know. They can't even like I just shared with you guys how deep it is. I went to one topic. I've been studying it 11 years. You have to study all of those topics just as long to figure it out. It is that intense. It is that deep. The Bible is the most incredible book, but it's not original. It's borrowed. It's the same stories. Solomon, right? I go into this in the second part of the presentation with you. Solomon was not a real person. He's three names for the sun. Sol, which is sun in Latin. Om, and if you've ever read the Upanishads, Om is the syllable of the light of the sun. And On is the city of light in Alexandria. On was the city of light. This is why when you go into a bedroom, it stays with us. You have to turn the lights on to become enlightened, because everything is spiritual. It's Sol, Om, On. You talk about, for example, shit like Samson and Delilah, right? This is where knowing Hebrew helps, right? Samson was called Shimshon. That was his name. Well, Shimshon translates to little son. So Samson is the little son. And Delilah, the root word in Hebrew of Delilah, is Lila, which means night. So what happens in the story? She betrays him. He goes blind. right? It's the story of the night overtaking the day. Each biblical story is just a different way of encoding how the sun goes through the 12 signs.
So I know Top's got to get sliding soon, so I have to ask the question, and you can give me the abridged version if you like. Micah, these Mexican aliens, what's going on? Are they sandcastles or are they real, dude? In your opinion, I'm not expecting you to know, but like,
Look,
are we about to
I
be
don't
deceived?
I don't get too much into aliens, but I will tell you that something did happen in Roswell in 47 because we had a burst of crazy technology come out in the subsequent years after that. You know, um, I mean, Jimmy Carter himself, while he was running for president, said he had an alien encounter, and people were like, "Okay," you know, nobody gave a shit. Um, are they real? Yes, they're not demons. Demons do exist. Aliens are not demons. There are malevolent ones and there are benevolent ones. You know, this is what my book series explains. Like, I go into all this stuff. I go into 20 different esoteric sciences, all sorts of conspiracies, hidden knowledge. My book series is called Into the Rabbit Hole. In fact, people who are listening, if you go to debunkmywork.com, everything I've ever done is on there. All my social media, there's a way to email me at the bottom. There's my YouTube channel where I go into all sorts of stuff, and you could buy my book series, Into the Rabbit Hole, and that's what it is. It's a rabbit hole. It basically mirrors real life. I predicted the pandemic in 2017, and my book came out in 2020 to prove it. In book 4, let me give you guys the idea. Remember how I told you I taught in fiction? There's a Japanese jellyfish called the Irukandji jellyfish. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it, but it's a very unique type of jellyfish, and it's only found on this one specific island in Japan. It's unique because when a jellyfish bites you or stings you, what do you usually do? You have to pee on it or get something on it or whatever. When this jellyfish stings you in Japan, it leaves you with an impending sense of doom, to the point where people have been going to their doctors begging them to kill them because they're terrified or frightened, they're horrified. So what the elites do is they take this protein that does this and they put it in the global mandated flu vaccine, which I wrote in 2017. And this is how I tell truth. This is how I tell people. And what I basically did with the Bible, I do with hidden knowledge and hidden information.
Damn. It's fucked up, man.
So that's a yes on the aliens. No.
It's a strong maybe. But all right,
It's a
listen,
strong
guys, I think
maybe,
that's a good spot to put a pin in this one until next time. Micah, so they can find you tell them your websites, tell them your socials and all that, because I do enjoy your Twitter page
just
as
go
well.
to debunkmywork.com, guys. I have a breakdown of every single ancient holy text on my website. I have links to my YouTube. I have links to my social media. I have a way to email me. It's all on my website, debunkmywork.com.
All right, David, I'm gonna plug real quick.
Once again, guys, I am David Lee Corbo, aka The Raven. You can go and watch The Ravens Watch at The Ravens Watch on YouTube. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me on Rumble, Spotify, all that good stuff. And if you want to talk, head over to Twitter. Find me at David_Lee_Corbo. And I just want to thank Micah for his time. That was fucking awesome, brother.
Thank you.
Hell yeah. Thank you, man. Again, Top Lobster, you know you can find me. Micah, thank you so much for coming on. I know this has been a couple times, but we'll do this again and go a little bit deeper this next time. But yeah, I enjoyed this.
Let me know how people react to this.
For sure. You'll see them. They're cursing you out, but you'll see how they react.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Peace out.
Take care.